Welcome back to another episode of Esports, Metaverse, and Beyond.
How are you doing today, Chase?
I'm doing great, Sage, and I'm excited to start season 2 of our podcast with an interview with Todd Harris, CEO and founder of Skillshot Media, High Res Studios, and most importantly, Ghost Gaming. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, it is great to be with you.
It's nice to meet you too, Todd.
I'm really excited for this interview. You own so many different businesses. It's really hard to keep track.
Well, I like video games, every aspect of video games. And as you mentioned, it started with high res and making games. But these days, I'm not responsible for that company. So 15 years, now there's another great team that is running that company. So I'm even more focused on the world of esports these days.
That's interesting. Since this is a show for gamers, we'd like to play a little game before we get into our episode. Are you ready for a bit of fun?
Bring it. Let's do it.
It's game time. So the audience gets to know you a little bit better. Can you share your favorite music genre and favorite music artist?
Wow. You started with a tough one. All right. I'm going to have to give a long answer. When I was like the age of you guys, I actually liked like heavy metal hair bands, like 80s rock. And then when I got into college, it was more old school hip hop, I guess, like LL Cool J, Run DMC. But these days, right now, I'd have to say, like, I guess you'd call it pop electronica. Like I was just listening to some Sia, S-I-A. I think she's amazing. So I'm going to say like Sia, Zed. So yeah, let's go with pop electronica these days.
Wow, your opinion of music changed drastically as you aged.
It did. Although I think what's common is I always like music that is somewhat positive and kind of heroic and has like a can-do spirit. And so maybe that's what's common, even though they sound pretty different from one another.
That's good. That's good.
What was the last game you beat, Mr. Harris, as in video game?
Wow. The last game I beat was a long time ago. I think I would say it was the game BioShock, which is one of my favorite games that we didn't make. I like the High Res Studios games best, of course, but BioShock is one of the few games that I played all the way to the end. I have to say, most times I'm not a beater. I'm not a completionist. I kind of sample different things, but BioShock was great.
Were there any games in 2022 that released that you played a lot of?
Not much in 2022. You know, the game I'm playing the most right now released a few years ago, and it's a mobile game, and that is the game Brawl Stars. I don't know if you guys played it, but it's like a very simple 3 versus 3 MOBA game, and I've got a lot of trophies. I play that game just about every day because it's on my phone and it's easy.
I've heard of the game before. I've never tried it, but I've heard many good things about it.
It's great. It's kind of similar to the game that we made, Smite, or a game like League of Legends, because it's a team game with different characters, but it's much simpler. It's fast. So a whole game only takes 3 minutes. So it's very easy to play when you're waiting in line or throughout the workday or the school day, because it doesn't take like an hour or a half hour like a lot of other multiplayer games do.
All right. And now, one bonus question. Since you're the founder of High Res Studios, what is your favorite game developed by them?
So that's easy. Our first game, which was called Global Agenda, and not a lot of people played it because it wasn't so popular, but it's by far my favorite game. It's kind of like combat, like Halo, but with teamwork, and then a role-playing system, and then a whole strategy game on the top. So there was a lot to it. So I loved Global Agenda.
The game sounds really unique.
It was probably a little too ambitious for us as our very first game, because it was a bunch of game genres all put together, and we were a pretty small team, but it was, as you say, very, very unique, which is probably why it was my favorite. There's a lot of different game types in one.
Well, thanks for playing, Mr. Harris. You just earned 400 points.
Nice, I'll take it.
So for people who don't know who you are, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm speaking to you guys from Atlanta, Georgia, and that is where I've been since I got to college. I got introduced to video games from my father. He was a programmer at IBM back in the day when there weren't too many people programming. And we had a very early video game device, Pong, literally old school Pong. And I would play Space Invaders with him in the arcades and Pac-Man. And I thought it would be really fun to make games. So I learned to do computer programming. I went to school in North Carolina University to study computer science. And then I moved to Atlanta and I got a job, and I wrote a lot of computer software, but it wasn't games. It was business applications. And I did that for a long time, but I was fortunate to be able to be part of starting the game developer Hi-Res Studios in 2005. And so we started that game development company. We learned a lot. We grew a lot. The first game was Global Agenda. Then we made one called Tribes Ascend. Then Smite, which is the most popular game we have, I would say. And in Smite, you play gods and goddesses from mythology. And that really grew the company. So that company is almost 450 people now. And it started with just 4 of us. So that's a lot of growth. But these days, I'm more involved in esports than in making games. And as you guys said in the introduction, Skillshot is an esports production and event company. So for anyone who's out there watching Twitch and they see these big tournaments and they see people doing the commentary and the play-by-play and organizing the tournament, that's what Skillshot does, is puts on those events. And then Ghost is an esports team. So we have professional players and we have content creators, and they all play under that banner of Ghost. So for people not familiar with esports, I say, if you think of regular traditional sports, Skillshot's a little like ESPN, like behind the scenes, making it happen. And then Ghost is a little like the Lakers or the Hawks. They're a team, but they play in a lot of different games, where the Lakers and the Hawks only play one game. So that's what I'm up to these days.
You and your team seem to have done a phenomenal job with shaping part of the esports industry. Smite is a very popular game. I still see it gets updates to this day. Do you miss developing games?
I do miss it a little bit. I like esports because I'm learning new things, and I got to be part of developing games for 15 years. But what I've always enjoyed is the creative process and working with a team to bring something new into the world. And that's what I was fortunate to be able to do, making a game like Smite. But that's also what you get to do when you make a broadcast or when you help build a team, is you're working with a bunch of different people and cooperating and putting something new into the world. But I always recommend the job of video game developer or design to young people who are interested in it. It's hard work, but it's a lot of fun, because your idea is suddenly there in the real world. It's the closest thing I know to magic, because if you know the right instructions, you just make something happen with technology, whether that's computer code or computer graphics or animation.
Right. Very, very inspiring. I bet a lot of our young viewers right now who will be watching this sometime after recording this will be very interesting in game designing and game development.
I
Mr.
hope so.
Harris,
We'd love to have more creators out there.
when did you what age did you decide that you wanted to make video games, Mr. Harris? And when did you start drifting away from making video games?
Great question. So about 7th grade, I think, is when I had played a lot of games. And it wasn't like today where there's a lot of games to choose from. Back then, there weren't as many games. And so I kind of felt like I had played all the big games out there, and the idea that I could make a game came into my head. And so there wasn't YouTube or other things to learn, like you guys are putting content out for people to learn from. So I went to the bookstore and I got the big book of basic games, and basic was a programming language back then, and I could just type them in to my computer, and they made very simple text games. They didn't even have any graphics at all. They were just words, but they were still games, like trivia games. And so I really enjoyed that process, and that's when I thought I wanted to do it. And then I did High Res Studios from the year 2005 is when we started, with 4 of us, as I mentioned. And then in the year 2020 is when I left High Res and started doing full-time Skillshot and then Ghost and other things.
That's really cool that you were able to get your start as a game developer as young as just 7th grade. I'm in 7th grade. It's just so much harder, it seems, to become a game developer back then versus now.
It's great that there's new tools. You know, I don't know, Chase, if you've tried any of them. You guys are clearly content creators on YouTube already, but tools that exist out there, like the program Scratch, which is free, and you could start that as early as 3rd or 4th grade. It's a block language, or even Game Maker or Unity and Unreal. These are all tools that fortunately are now freely available, at least to get started with, and for aspiring game developers.
Speaking of Scratch, my brother and I actually used to do some coding on Scratch when we were younger.
I love that. Both of my kids, I have a son and a daughter, and now they're older, but with both of them, we learned Scratch together, and they made a lot of games. Sometimes they even made games in Scratch for their school projects. Instead of doing a physical poster or maybe a PowerPoint design, they would do interactive games for the lesson. I always love that because they tend to be very fun to make, and also fun for the audience because they're more interactive, as you guys know.
Yeah, Scratch is very fun, and I can't wait to see the young developers who use Scratch grow up and then they develop games themselves.
For sure. Yeah, we need more creators, more stories, more innovative ideas out there. So I saw that you guys had recently on my friend Steve from Epic, who he does a lot of work with tools for young people, and that's also very close to my passion because that's how I got started in gaming and in technology. So yeah, any young people out there, I really encourage you to dip your toes into being part of creating a game. Even if you decide to not do it as a job, they're really good skills to learn.
I think that's some good advice. I meant Todd. Sorry, Todd.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And because you're the owner of multiple businesses, what's the best skill that you're looking for when hiring people?
That's a great question. Hiring people's very important, particularly when you're starting something new, because you are a young company and you can't afford to have so many people. So I think that some of the skills that are important are being able to cooperate and work well with other people. Some people think that making a game is more of a solo project and you're just sitting by yourself doing art or doing code, but that's the opposite. You are working on the computer a lot, but you're always cooperating with other people. And so having those teamwork skills is very important. A second thing is just being a hard worker. It's not easy to make a game. It's fun, but it's also hard work. So being able to apply yourself and work hard is number two. And I think the third most important thing is being able to take feedback on your work and not take it in a way that feels like it's an attack on you. It's more of a way to make your work even better and develop your skills. And so sometimes we call that a growth mindset, the idea that you use feedback and then you get better. Just like in a game, you're going to fail the first time you try to beat a level, and then you're going to fail again. But each time you learn. And in the workplace, it's like that. And when you're making a game, you fail all the time because you're kind of learning as you go what is going to be fun and what your end user is going to want. And so someone that is not just good, but they can take feedback constructively and use it to just make them and the project even better.
Those traits sound really great. Now, what would you say to someone who wanted to create their own business where they create games? What advice would you give them?
So I think it's very hard to create a business. So I would just be clear about that. People can do it and they do it, but it is hard. So I think it's important to know what's ahead of you. Some people do it very early, like right out of school or before they even go to college. For many people, like my own journey was being part of other companies first and learning how companies work and learning what kind of company culture I wanted to have versus not. And that was helpful for me. So I think my first bit of advice is just to think about why you want to do it on your own, kind of reflect on your motivations. Do you want to do it because you like the idea of being your own boss and maybe you're willing to, let's say, make less money than working for someone else because you want to have control and you want to be able to tell yourself what to do? Or are there other reasons you want to do it? So I think just thinking about your own goals are very important. And then if you decide to do it, my next advice is what we talked about before, which is be really deliberate about your partners and your employees early on. Surround yourself with great people.
That I think both of those pieces of advice were great for people who want to be hired and people who want to start their own businesses. I hope they use that in the future. And so backtracking away from game development, we're talking about your company, Skillshot. What is it like designing these big esports events and how long does it take?
So it can take a while. I'll give you an example. We did, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a game called Brawlhalla. It's kind of like Smash. It's like Super Smash that you probably know, but it's a free-to-play platform fighter. That is a pretty popular game because it's free to play and it's available on the PC and the Switch and the Xbox and the PlayStation. And so we did recently their World Championship event. So this was $500,000 in prizing. It always makes people's brain, kind of explode if they're not familiar with how big esports can be. And about 600 competitors from all around the world. So 600 people came to a big ballroom, $500,000, and 3 days of competition. So that event took about 4 months of planning. And I'm going to say there were over 100 people that were working that event. Some examples would be people on camera, like you guys that are in front of the camera and doing the play-by-play, but then people behind the camera, physical camera people that were capturing the live action, and then a whole production team. Because when you have all these different cameras, someone's switching, they're like counting down from showing you as the commentators to the players, and then maybe the in-game footage, right? And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, switch the camera, and then audio engineers. So there's a lot of different jobs and planning involved with a big event, and it feels really good when it's over. Everyone takes a picture in front of the stage, and you think a lot of work, but job well done.
That's a lot of work put into that, definitely. So how long does it take to get all of this together?
Well, again, in that case, it was 4 months of planning, but we had been talking with that game developer really for almost a year. So it took a long time, a very high level planning, and then 4 months of having a team just working on a project plan and a schedule and checking off tasks to make sure we had all of the elements of the event.
What you do, like I said before, what you do is phenomenal, and I'm speechless about all of it.
Well, thanks.
Mr. Harris, are any other prizes that you give for winners of your esports tournaments?
Yeah, every game is totally different. So and sometimes it's a tournament that Skillshot is doing, and sometimes we're doing the event management for a partner and they're supplying the prize. For example, coming up in February, we work with another great company out there that's called Community. It's spelled CX, Community. And one of the things that they do, they actually focus on some historically Black colleges and universities, and they've set up a league for what they call these HBCU Esports League. And so we're doing a Call of Duty event in February for that community, and Mountain Dew is the sponsor, and they've been very generous, and that's going to be another, I think, $500,000 that will go in the form of different scholarships to that community. So it's esports. A lot of times the money comes from other companies out there. It's not always just us. There's other companies out there that are your sponsors, and they're helping to provide the prizing, and sometimes helping to pay the money to make the event happen too.
Wow, that's a lot of money companies are giving to sponsors. It's a lot of stuff, and what you're doing is great for communities of people who need the money, or gamers who are really good at what they're doing and they want to have a way to make money off of it.
For sure. That's probably one big change from when I was growing up, because I was just lucky and fortunate, that I had a dad that worked at IBM, and we could get our hands on this computer and consoles back in the day. And a lot of people don't have that. And so the industry is trying to work on kind of more opportunities for different people. And video games are great like that, because if you have an internet connection and you have a device, you can connect with people all over the world and you can learn these new skills. So yeah, we at Skillshot and at Ghost Gaming try to support projects like that. So.
All right, next I'm going to bring up NASA, which I heard is one of your projects that help kids, but we'd like to hear a little bit more information on that and how our audience can get involved with it.
Great. Yeah. So NASIF is the North American Scholastic Esports Foundation. And so um, basically it's a nonprofit company, and their mission is all around using games for education for young people. And they started originally in California. Are you guys in Los Angeles? Where are
No.
you?
We're in North Carolina.
North Carolina. That's right. Awesome. So they started in Orange County originally, in that one school system. And now they've spread across so that almost every state, I think there's a chapter in North Carolina, although I'd have to check, but different states have chapters. And really what NASIF does is try to get materials in the hands of parents and teachers to use video games for positive student outcomes. So as you know, sometimes people have misperceptions around gaming. They think it's going to turn people violent, or it's a complete waste of time. It's going to rot your brain. And so what NASIF does is try to give materials that help use games, because kids are going to play games anyway. If you do it within a more structured setting, like maybe inside your school or inside a boys and girls club or a community center, then you can get the positive side of gaming. So that's what NASIF does. And there's a great team there. And so I just try to support their work as I can. I'm the chairperson of the board, but there's people that do it every day.
That's really great for kids who just want to play games, but their parents are skeptical on it. So far, has this program been successful?
It has. Yeah, it's been successful not only here in the US, but also overseas. We just had a conference in Atlanta, and through NASIF, we had 20 educators and people from the gaming industry that came over from Japan, and they were trying to learn about how this program worked so they could take it back to some of their schools in Japan. And so the idea that this is spreading around the world is pretty exciting.
Do you think you're ever going to take this internationally, besides just Japan, maybe some in Europe or Australia?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's a few international groups already that NASIF is working with. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, because even though parents and teachers might be skeptical of video games, they understand things like the ability to interact with other people and other cultures around the world. Again, sometimes people will travel to Europe or travel to Australia, but if you can have that interaction online through a video game, through talking on voice chat, and still get to know another culture, that's much easier. Not everyone can afford to go to Europe or go to Australia. So it helps us build, I think, more of a global culture and more awareness when we can have these international sort of events. One example in Minecraft, I don't know, do you guys play Minecraft?
We do.
I play Minecraft.
Nice. So there was a NASIF project that's international, where there's a challenge to grow as much food kind of inside of a Minecraft biodome. And there's different biodomes with different environments. And so it's a way to learn about basically agriculture and technology inside of Minecraft, and also to interact with other kids around the world.
Interesting.
The competition sounds pretty fun, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, it's great. It gets a lot of participation. So those are things that NASIF does. Some of those are beyond the game challenges, where you're not playing a game, but you're problem solving in a gaming environment. And then they also just have more traditional esports tournaments, like try to play and win the game Rocket League or others.
Your Atlanta-based esports team, Ghost Gaming, has won 15 tournaments, and they've cultivated a huge fan base. Please tell me, what's your secret?
It's not easy running an esports team, that's for sure. I would say that number one, I can't take credit for the name because I didn't found Ghost. It was another group that started it, but I just liked the name and the look of the logo. I just thought it was very clean and it kind of stood out and it stuck in our brain. And so when there was an opportunity for us to get involved and use that name and that trademark, that was exciting. And I think we just try to be very community oriented. That's probably the number one thing, even over the next 2 years, that people will see from Ghost is we have really good players and famous YouTubers and Twitch streamers, but we really want to also support the community and what's called the grassroots. So an example, for instance, is we've started doing community tournaments in the game Rocket League and in the game Valorant, where anybody, even if they're not on Team Ghost, can join our Discord and can play about every 2 weeks with some of our creators and get live streamed. So events like that, I think, are important for building the culture of the team.
We also heard that you're the chair of the Atlanta Esports Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what responsibilities come along with being in that position?
Yeah, great question. You guys have done your homework and research. I would say that for traditional sports like football and basketball, for a long time now, the major cities have had something called the Sports Commission, and they try to get the big events to go to that city. And the Atlanta Esports Alliance was unique because Atlanta, back in the day, we got the Olympics here, we got the Super Bowl here, we got the college football championship here. And so this is the esports version of what traditional sports has done for a long time. And so it was great. Earlier in November, part of the work we did with the Atlanta Esports Alliance is we got the League of Legends semifinals here. League of Legends, as you guys probably know, it's such a popular game. And that was in State Farm Arena, where the Hawks play, the basketball team of Atlanta. And it sold out in 5 minutes. And it was 2 days of about 20,000 people in a basketball arena, all cheering like crazy for League of Legends on back-to-back 2 nights. So the Atlanta Esports Alliance goes out and tries to present Atlanta for a great place to host these big events. And I have to say, since you guys are in North Carolina, that North Carolina has also done a really good job recently in the past 3 years of getting some major events there. The Fortnite Invitational was there. There's a Call of Duty event, Rainbow Six. So there's a lot of activity happening in your own state as well.
I'm glad that all of this esports activity is happening in North Carolina too, since it seems like esports for a long time now has been pushed to the side, considered not a real sport, but really it is. If chess is considered a sport, I think esports should be considered a sport too.
I think that's well said. It's certainly an intellectual sport. And like you said, people, they don't really worry about whether chess is a sport or not. They know it's a competition that takes really high degrees of skill and mastery, and that there's a big difference between a new player and an expert player. And it's fun to watch people compete at a high level. And so whether you use the example of chess or Formula One or NASCAR, which is a human and a machine working together, but people watch when it's competitive and there's a high degree of skill involved, and esports is similar.
Mhm. I agree with that. Well, guess what, Sage? You know what time it is?
Yep, it's time for Esports Metaverse
News.
Todd, what's the biggest trend that you're currently seeing in the esports industry?
Wow. So I would say in terms of games in the last year, the game Valorant has a lot of heat behind it. It's growing quite nicely. Valorant is a team-based game. It's more of a first-person shooter perspective, but made by the same company that made League of Legends, which is very successful. So it's a up-and-coming game. I would say the trend in terms of esports teams like Ghost and others is they're getting more broad from just the competition. It used to be that teams would try to sign up the very best players who were good at winning. But now teams are signing what are called content creators, just like you guys are content creators. So Ghost and other teams are signing people that have big audiences on Twitch or YouTube or TikTok, and they're good at the game, but they're not the very, very best. It's not so much about the competition. It's about the content and the engagement of their audience. They might be funny, or they, might just have a point of view that people want to hear. And so that's the trend of esports, is not just competition, but also content and signing these other types. And that's great because it's opening up more ways for different gamers to participate. It's hard to just stay the best all the time. But if you're putting out content that people find valuable or entertaining, that's another way to get signed to an esports team.
I think it makes sense that esports teams are getting YouTubers and influencers to be on the team, especially now since esports is on the rise. And if teams have someone that a lot of people know and that a lot of people know and look up to, then they'll get into the esports space.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And in other news, where do you think the state of esports will be heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it's just going to get bigger. It's going to look a little different. It might not be the games that are popular today. They might be different games. But I think that, so that's number one. And that just as we talked about, teams are going to sign content creators on other platforms. But it's going to get bigger because if you look at the statistics of different age groups, there's not too many people as old as me that play games. If you look at your guys' peers, a lot of them are playing games. Most of them are playing games. And so with each next generation, a higher percentage are playing games and watching games. And so and they're also spending more time. And so I think you're going to see more and more companies that are not even gaming companies or esports companies look to gaming and esports for their marketing. So instead of maybe sponsoring the Super Bowl or the NBA championship, they're going to look at how do we reach these young people? They might not be watching those things, but they're definitely playing games and watching esports. So that trend is going to continue, I think.
Very interesting. What do you think about the state of physical sports, like football and soccer?
I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. I think the participation, it is starting to go down a little bit. And a lot of those physical sports, they're actually using video games to help kids know about the physical sport. I don't know how it was for you both, but for some kids, the first way they learn the rules of soccer are playing FIFA. And then they go to the real world soccer field or the physical soccer field, or the same with NBA 2K. So I think the teams and leagues that do physical sports are going to continue to support esports or the virtual game because it helps people stay in and learn the physical sport. And the other thing that's exciting, that's still going to take a long time, I think, but virtual reality and augmented reality, where you're in a virtual world, but you're still getting to move and you have some physicality, that's very exciting too, because it brings in wellness and movement and exercise while still being really fun. I mean, imagine you're playing a game, you're trying to kill a dragon or whatever it is, and you're getting your exercise that way. That's going to be a lot more fun for a lot of people and keep them healthy while they're gaming.
Well, thank you for sharing. This is one of my last questions. What do you think of virtual reality as an esport? Because at this moment in time, virtual reality isn't really part of esports. But in that time span of about 10 years, do you think it will be there?
I think 10 years, yes. 3 years, probably not. And like I said, it's very exciting because people will be able to move and it'll be very fun to watch. The reason it's not so popular now is even though there's a lot of Quest units and PlayStation VR units out there, there's not so many to be popular enough for an esport. An esport's only popular when there's millions of people that play it, because then they know how to appreciate people playing it at a high skill. So I think it's going to take longer than 2 or 3 years, but by 10 years, probably yes.
Mr. Harris, my brother and I heard recently that Hyra sponsored a Mr. Beast video to promote your new game, the Vine Knockout. What was that like, sponsoring the most followed person on YouTube?
Yeah, well, I can't speak to that in too much detail because it was a very exciting marketing cooperation, but it was after I left Hi-Rez. So I can tell you that it's always fun to work with a big streamer or a big YouTuber. And in fact, when I was at Hi-Rez, this is not even someone that's so popular now, but back then the biggest YouTuber was PewDiePie. And even before other game developers were working with big YouTubers, we had the idea that that would work very well. And so we did multiple things with PewDiePie and Smite, and we didn't even have to go through his agent or anything. It was so early, we just, I would send him an email and we would connect cooperation. And, he did some very cool things with the game Smite. And so these days it's gotten a little harder because most of the YouTubers or the Twitch streamers, they have agents. In case of Mr. Beast, his agent probably has an agent. He's so big. There's a lot of layers, but it's always exciting when you can work with someone, especially if they're really into the game. You can kind of tell if it's hashtag ad and they're just getting paid and they're not into it. But as you guys probably know, if you watch a YouTuber or a streamer and they're actually enjoying it, that's great. And it results in a lot of downloads for the game.
That's great. I don't even really watch PewDiePie, but I'd understand that sponsoring PewDiePie seems like a really big deal on both the end of PewDiePie himself getting paid by a big company to promote one of their games, and then you guys too, because then he's also promoting your game and you get to work with a successful YouTuber. It's
That's
just
right.
a great deal on both sides.
Yeah, exactly right. And now I'm kind of on the other side of that with Ghost because we have some YouTubers and some TikTokers and Twitch streamers. So these days, it's kind of the flip side of that, where sometimes we'll work with someone making a game or even other products, and they want to market their product through gamers, which is a pretty cool trend.
Well, thank you for doing this interview with us. It went amazingly. Everything you said I think it was phenomenal, and you did a great job with all the businesses you built up and people you've helped. But before we go, can you share with us how people can get in touch or how to find esports events that you and Skillshot produce?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you guys for the well researched questions. It was awesome talking to you. And I wish you good luck with this show. You've already had some amazing guests I've seen. For myself and Skillshot and Ghost, the easiest is to follow me. So I'm Todd Allen Harris, ToddAlan Harris. And the two platforms that I post a lot on are LinkedIn and Twitter. And that's where people can keep up with what Ghost is doing and what Skillshot is doing. And hopefully we'll see some of your viewers or you guys as well at a future event.
Wait, sorry. Before we go, Mr. Harris, once again, we enjoyed today's conversation. But before we go, do you have any advice for children and parents that will be listening to us soon?
I would say that it's good to just have an open dialogue between kids and parents about gaming. Sometimes parents are intimidated because they don't know the technology or they don't know the game. And so maybe they just don't ask, and then it feels very foreign. And so I'd say just have open communication, just like you would with other topics, and ask your young person, what games they're playing and why they find them interesting. And maybe, are they playing online with other people or not? And I think having that communication allows for safe gaming and just maximizes the chance that the kid and the parent are going to be on the same page around gaming habits.
Thank you for advice, Mr. Harris. And Chase and I hope that we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
I look
Bye.
forward to it. Bye, guys.
Bye.